Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
They're coming up after. Okay, Tom, all right. Sorry about that. But, Bill Workhorse is coming up next, and one of his talking points is over half of the people going through the process of transgenderism are on the autistic spectrum. And he told me earlier that if you include all neurodivergence, it's like 90. So as someone on the spectrum myself, it's like, this breaks my heart to see people most similar to me and that have been through a lot of what I've been through, going through this. And it's a tragedy. So, and quite frankly, I call it the Holocaust of our time. So what we gotta do is bring these people who have most likely been through some intense trauma and hardship. Like, I'm no exception. I've had some crazy things happen to me. So I created an organization called the Autistic Freedom Network so that all these people, all these kids that have been through unimaginable harm, like, to put that into perspective, just imagine if COVID restrictions lasted your whole childhood. Like, just put that in perspective. That's what our lives are like. So these kids all deserve a leader, someone that'll fight for them, someone that'll give them a voice, that'll give them protection and make sure that they live the best life possible. That's what I'm here for, and we're going to do it.
That is awesome. So please take time to reach out to him and learn more about his organization, because that is amazing. And we have so much more work to do in that area. So thank you for what you're doing. Raise your hand if you have a table out there. And Erica, you'll come around.
Welcome back to Whistleblower Wednesday. The Rob Maness Show's live on Worldview Tube and our X Faces simulcast. Well, today, you just heard it. We're introducing the Autistic Freedom Network. I've made no secret that I'm the dad of an autistic son, a son who I homeschooled from junior high all the way through high school graduation, and the challenges our family and he faced in various government and non-government systems, and what we had to do just to figure out how to help him. That's why I'm very excited to do the show today about the Autistic Freedom Network and have its founder as my guest, who you just saw in that opening video. Why do we need this? Well, I'll let them tell you from their website. Listen up, folks. Quote, people on the autism spectrum have been forgotten for several decades while facing unbelievable abuse. Our struggle is worse than that of a third world country, from the highest rate of social isolation to the highest unemployment rate in the world, to an unbelievable rate of trans identification. The reasons for this struggle go far beyond autism or other neurodivergences alone. We face an inhumane treatment from our doctors, teachers, social workers, and politicians. All of them are using our diagnosis to justify the so-called treatment we're put through, and will cite misconceptions and outright lies to claim it's all evidence-based. To get a picture of what we're dealing with, imagine if COVID lasted your whole childhood from infancy to coming of age. That should give you an idea of what it's like to grow up diagnosed autistic. For those who haven't been diagnosed, the struggles of their neurodivergence go untreated, leading to loneliness and neglect, but they're not usually subject to outright discrimination. In this tragic status quo, the Autistic Freedom Network was founded by Sven Sharpen, my guest today. The AFN vows to make sure that every person on the spectrum or with some other form of neurodivergence like ADHD, OCD, bipolarity is properly supported, treated, and has their biblical and constitutional rights respected first and foremost. No child deserves to grow up without a childhood. And we will end this hardship with the goals that AFN has laid out. Sven, my new friend that I met just a couple of months ago where you gave that speech out in Colorado, welcome to the Rob Maness Show, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure, it's an honor, and a big blessing. Like, this is God's work right here. So,
it absolutely is. He brought us together, and I'm so grateful for it. Before we go too deep into AFN, the organization itself, talk about your personal experiences in growing up and your personal background and what led you up to this decision to start this great organization.
well, I'm going to make this as brief as I can, but to make an incredibly long story short, I was diagnosed with autism before I turned 2 years old, and in fact, next month will have marked 20 years since I was diagnosed with autism. And in reaction to this diagnosis, my parents obviously they took me to the doctors. There's no way they didn't. And they were told I had to go through a process called early intervention, which the whole point of which is to prepare you for regular school. But all this really did was take away key toddler development and key playtime away. I mean, it wasn't as bad for me as it was for a lot of other kids on the spectrum, but it still took away key development. And, once I did get into kindergarten, it's not like they abused me, but they just didn't really know what they were doing. I was probably the first autistic kid they ever had, honestly. This was like 16 years ago. And it was around the same time I was put on Zoloft. Yes, Zoloft at 5 years old, along with risperidone. There have been scandals over these drugs that I've been put on that I only got off earlier this year, about 6 months ago. And I was put on this at 5 years old, and it went all the way to 21, so I don't even know what it's done to me. So, and then the third one is clonidine, which I'm still getting off of today. And, after this, I was obviously homeschooled for half a year, but then I went back to public school, which turned out to be a mistake because they kept trying to give me infantile assignments. But thank God throughout elementary school, my parents were able to fight off a lot of these crazy people who think that I'm dysfunctional when I'm not. And once I got into middle school, it got even worse because, as time went on, especially since Obama was president, and I think schools, not only did they get more funding, but they also got more authoritarian, and I received some pretty bad treatment in middle school. Like, I couldn't really say anything without getting in trouble. And like, the worst thing they did was they forced me to move schools when I was 14. Like, I couldn't even go to a government school that didn't have what's called an effective needs program, which is what I was forced into from my diagnosis. So I was forced to move to another school in a different town. So if you think it's bad that zip code defines your school choice, just wait until you have a diagnosis of something where that's going to be what's determining your school choice. And over the course of the years, like, my parents tried to send me to Christian school, to charter school, or just schools that weren't government schools. And every time they were like, oh, we don't know how to deal with autistic kids. That's what I've been told anyway, but there could be something more sinister going on. And in 5th and 6th grade, I was also given preschool level material by the social workers, by the special education people, even though I was smarter than my classmates in both of those grades. But back to when I was forced to move schools for my first year of high school, I was forced to go to another school, and this put me in a really deep depression because I'd spent the last 4 years before that developing some pretty good relationships, many of which I've still been able to hang on to this day. And like, I almost went trans because of a lot of this. I mean, there were other factors too, but being forced to move schools, like, it really, really hurt and put me through an effeminate phase, actually. I mean, there were other things too that played a role in this. But thank God I did not ever identify as trans. That would have just been really bad. But in my case, I avoided it. And, thanks to the Lord God Almighty. But it was still an extremely depressing year. Like, I missed my friends for, like, I had suicidal ideations. And the only reason they did this, well, they did this for my autism diagnosis. And my parents were threatened with my failure. They said, if he doesn't move schools, he's going to fail. That's pretty much what they were saying. And so my parents were sort of forced to allow this to happen. And it was really sad. I mean, I did get back to my friends. This only happened for 1 year, but the damage was done for one, and COVID took out another year and a half of my high school, which, is interesting. COVID itself is only a mere footnote in my story. But, I did graduate on time, but, I've been trying to just start my life, and then I've realized that most of my peers have gone trans. The things that they went through, that I've went through, a lot of the peers that have went through the same things have all gone trans. And it's just a tragedy, considering humans need peers to talk to. We deserve to have neighbors that'll understand us and that we can understand. And it's just sad to see this happen, to see the beauty and the character and the charisma of my peers just be completely faded out by this trans ideology that we're very vulnerable to, and I'd say we're being targeted. So that's why I founded the Autistic Freedom Network, to fight off not just the trans ideology, but fight off all of the horrible policies sponsored by our doctors and politicians and teachers that are putting us through all of this. And we got to do something about it once and for all. We got to fight.
Yeah, exactly right, man. I'm glad you started the organization. I wish it had been around, or that I had even thought to start it. But parents are so absorbed. In my case, I was just totally absorbed with homeschooling my son. I took him out at the beginning of 7th grade because the system just couldn't provide the environment that he needed in order to be successful, because of things like paras. The thing that bothered him the most was they assigned a para to him early on. And if you don't like the personality of that para, you really don't have a choice. And he would act out. And of course, then they put him in isolation rooms and those kind of things. And once he got out of middle school, he was big. So, I didn't want him to hurt himself or hurt anybody else when they were putting him in holds and things like that, because he was acting out in response to some of these so-called methodologies of wanting to get help. So I'm glad you started this group up. I think it'll be a place where parents can go, one of many resources, obviously, to try to see what the reality is. Because the reality, Sven, is that autistic children and other kids with you call it neurodivergencies, like ADHD, they're just as smart as everybody else. Or usually they're
we're still the same people,
and they're usually smarter than their peers from an intellectual perspective. Quite often, not every time, but quite often. And they don't need to be to try to overlay standard discipline or even increased discipline because you think it's right because of the problem that they have or the way they're made up and their brains work. Generally is the wrong way to go, right?
Yeah, and don't even get me started on the whole isolation rooms thing. I've heard some really terrible things from parents, things that have happened to their kids by these people who are supposedly in the special education field. And that's who I'm fighting against, the special education social workers. And, come to think of it, many of them are part of communist teachers unions and stuff. And, yesterday I went to the state capitol on accident thinking there was an event, and I overheard someone, we work with autistic kids, someone on the liberal side of things. And I'm like, shoot, this is who's doing the abuse.
Yeah, that's what our society needs to understand, is that you don't have to abuse these kids. You don't have to overly discipline them. You just have to find the space that their unique brains are capable of operating in so that they can be integrated fully into our society. My youngest son, he just turned 21. Yesterday he passed his national certification test for automotive technology mechanic. He's finished two years of community college doing that. He's a welder. He's doing fantastic. But we just had to find the right space for him to be able to learn and grow and all that. And the government systems and even the nonprofit systems really weren't effective at it. We got to take a commercial break. When we come back, Then I want to dive into what you were talking about, the control that school systems, other government agencies, the pharmaceutical industry puts on the parents that force them to think they have no choice but to put their kids into these really authoritarian programs. We'll be right back with the founder of the Autistic Freedom Network, Ben Sharpen.
You woke up with a sore throat and a low-grade fever. You know you are getting sick, so here's your choices. You can get sicker and miss work, try to see a doctor this week, or sit hours in a crowded waiting room at urgent care.
I have a smarter option for you. Open your medical emergency kit, match your symptoms to doctor-recommended prescription in your booklet, and take the right meds now and get well faster.
This is not a first aid kit. It's like having an urgent care in your home. It includes doctor-prescribed medications to treat over 39 medical issues like respiratory infections, strep throat, pneumonia, UTIs, and more.
No waiting to see the doctor and no standing in line at the pharmacy. It's right here.
Every home should have at least one medical emergency kit, and here's how to order.
Go to worldviewhealthcare.com. Your kit to treat dozens of common and serious illnesses is rushed to your door. worldviewhealthcare.com. That's worldviewhealthcare.com.
The emergency kit available at worldviewhealthcare.com. Make sure you don't have to go to urgent care. I got pneumonia. I didn't have to go. I took this last year. Stayed at home, went to bed.
Hello, Douglas County School Board members. My name is Sven Sharpen. I'm a former student, graduated 3 years ago. I'm going to tell you what life is like for a student on the autism spectrum where the district decides how the child is raised, which is why I advocate for an opt-in policy, because parents deserve better and to know exactly what's happening with their kids. I was given preschool level assignments in 5th grade without my parents' consent, and the only reason they know now is because I told them, even though I was smarter than my 5th grade classmates. But this came to a head when I was 14 years old, when Douglas County school board officials, or just school officials in general, decided they were going to choose where I attend school. And I was forced to attend Douglas County High School, not far from here, simply because of my autism diagnosis. And I lost on 4 years of my relationships, completely undone, and an entire year of high school. And this happened because my parents were threatened with my failure if I did not be forced to move. Even though I was not failing, I did really good socially, and Douglas County School District officials took that from me. This caused a serious depression with suicidal ideation, and it felt like my life didn't matter. Parents should be raising their kids, not schools. These Colorado health surveys include a lot of inappropriate topics that children should not be learning about, like gender ideology. Children shouldn't be forced to participate in this without parental knowledge, let alone consent. I've been trying to find support for what I've been through because of district policies, and I can't find peers because now they're all trans because of frickin' surveys like these, as well as the social hardships that were artificially created. This is a health survey that must be an opt-in, and I encourage a vote yes on making this an opt-in, because parents need to know exactly what's going on with their kids, and especially those on the autism spectrum, because parents have their God-given right to raise their kids, not school boards. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Whistleblower Wednesday, and we've got that man with us today. He's the founder of the Autistic Freedom Network, and Sven, that was a great job at that testimony in that venue there, talking to the government. And one of the things I wanted to ask you a little bit deeper about is this control that government schools try to get over parents. Threatening that you're going to fail is one thing, but what are some of the other specific types of control mechanisms that you have seen or that other people have told you about that folks need to be aware of from these school systems?
Yeah, well, there's a whole lot of stuff, and quite frankly, we need to do more research into this because I don't know all this for sure just yet, and that's what I'm certainly going to be focusing on. But from experience, it's not just the threatening parents with their kids' failure that I've seen. I've seen where schools, you've seen this a ton of times, where schools will cover up what they're doing to kids, like where kids get trans behind their backs. And when I was given preschool level material in 5th grade, the school obviously didn't bring that up to my parents. The only reason my parents know about that is because I told them. I'm pretty sure I told them like the day of, or at least in the days following. And like they just cover things up, and they also try to bully people into compliance. The left as a whole does this, where they have some policy that makes no sense, and special education is no different than this. And they have all these messed up rules, and if somebody breaks them, like they'll really, you've seen what they do to these kids as a form of quote unquote punishment, even though it's more like abuse, you know, the isolation rooms. And I've seen worse, where kids have also been like sat on, they've been physically and verbally harmed, and some have even been labeled as future school shooters, which is just absolutely insane. And they do this to a fringe to bully people into compliance. Obviously, I didn't feel threatened when I was being attacked like this. I did stand up for myself and my parents, saying, this isn't right. What are we doing? And obviously, they don't listen to you. They'll never listen to you. They think you're worthless. Of course, they're not going to listen to you. So, and of course, they have all this government power, and they use diagnosis to justify a lot of it, along with the lies that we've seen. Our misconceptions. I mean, it might be true for some, but for most, it's not. And it's most certainly being paid for by taxpayer dollars to keep this thing alive. And the last thing I'll say is they don't really talk about, well, first of all, they don't even give you things you should be learning, like math, literacy, science, and history. They instead teach about self-esteem and SEL, which I've grown to learn is a Marxist indoctrination program. And they always ask, the first thing they say to you every day is, oh, how do you feel? What zone are you in? Usually that's red, yellow, or green, or it's like a number ranked from 1 through 5. Usually 1 through 5. Sometimes I've seen 1 through 4, 1 through 3, with 1 being you're happy, and then the maximum number being you're out of control. And I've also seen sort of de facto social credit, where there's a leveling system where the more loyal you are to them and the more obedient to the system you are, the easier it is to sort of work your way out of the program. Whereas the more rebellious and disloyal or just unacademic you are, the lower you go. And let's be honest, you don't really have freedom of speech, movement, socialization, or really faith at all in these programs. So it's pretty much just communism in our schools that's existed since at least the 90s. I mean, this has been going on for probably 30 years or so. And we got to do something about this. I think this should be illegal, quite frankly. There's better ways to raise kids, and parents need to know about all this that's going on.
Yeah, and one of the things that we ran into was we just didn't know enough about proposed treatments of the condition, because we didn't know enough about our son's condition. We didn't actually get an autism diagnosis till he was 9, and we started taking him to doctors when he was 18 months old because something happened in his growth that changed him, you know. And but we just weren't very familiar with some of these proposals, like the medications you mentioned that you were on initially. Risperidone was one of the ones that they put our son on, and he was misdiagnosed as pediatric bipolar, you know, and he was very, very young, like you mentioned, and everything. How do we help parents understand that the pharmaceutical companies are also exercising this control over the parents to get their medications into these kids inappropriately? How do we help them understand how that's happening?
Well, I can't remember exactly what my parents had to deal with, but, you know, I was dealing with this sort of thing, maybe a slightly more extreme version of what every kid would deal with. Like, I've heard things like running off uncontrollably or having emotions that are hard to control, which, you know, one of the things about being autistic is your emotions, they're the same, but they might be more intense. So instead of the traditional methods of, you know, more relaxing things or barriers to keep kids in, my parents were instead just told, put this kid on medication and this is your only option. Most certainly that was the only option they were given. My dad recently told me actually that he didn't want to put me on medications. He just wanted to let me grow up naturally. And I agree with that. But my mom was like, no, we have to put him on meds. But because mom did a lot of the healthcare stuff, and she was most certainly told by doctors that it was the only option for me. And it was just it was, in hindsight, a mistake. And in the first few weeks, I was miserable from what I was told by my parents. Like, I was only a few years old. I don't really remember much of that. But I hear it was terrible. And it's just, I have no clue what it did. But one of the things it did do was give me these random twitches for life that are uncontrollable. So if you hear about stimming, that might be chemical.
Okay.
And it was caused in reaction to me having a diagnosis of autism. Now, if a kid had that and didn't have a diagnosis of autism, it would probably be a different story. They would probably just be like, oh, put up baby barriers or something. Or, I don't know, let him play with his favorite toys. I don't know. But the reaction of what somebody who's diagnosed with autism and someone who's not is pretty much they're complete opposite. And it's just, it makes no sense when we're talking about the same thing, different reaction. And we got to do something about this. But my parents were inexperienced. They weren't exactly they didn't know a whole lot about parenting when I was first diagnosed. Like, I'm their oldest child, and I was only a little under 2 years old, so they didn't really know what to do. So they just relied on big pharma to tell them what to do, which has obviously turned out to be a mistake.
Yeah.
So it's
that's something that our son was our youngest. He's our fifth, but we weren't familiar with the conditions and the treatments for it, if there were any necessary, really. So yeah, we went through years and years of different medications and different tactics.
Wow.
And everything. And finally, in 7th grade, after 2 weeks of that, where he was having to change classes and he just wasn't able to work in that environment, I pulled him out and decided to homeschool him. But the very next step that I took was remove him from all medication. And what I found 8 months after the medications were completely out of his system, that I was able to figure out a way to take a really good, strong curriculum that didn't have any of the craziness in it. It was just the basics of math, reading, science, and history.
All right.
But give him the space. He just needed the right space to be able to get it done. And he did fine. Not one outburst of aggression the whole time I homeschooled him. Where, like I said, he had a pair in middle school going into 7th grade because they were concerned about that. And I think it was the meds that were really causing that, because what the real deal is what you talked about, is that these kids they just have a different way of a different need for their environment, even though their reaction may be stronger, but it's pretty much the same as a kid that doesn't have autism. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I just don't think people understand that. Talk about some of the key misconceptions that your group, as one of the goals, is to debunk the misconceptions about autistic kids real quick before we get to this break. What are some of the key misconceptions that you want to debunk?
Well, there's quite a lot, and I don't have time to talk about them all, but some of the most common ones, like, really the most common one is that of a child that is dysfunctional, like a child that can't do anything for themselves, like they're nonverbal, they're not potty trained, they're just incapable of living life as it is set up. And I understand that's a real thing. I've seen it myself many times, and I feel terrible for them. And I'm glad we've got RFK Jr. to talk about it. But the problem is they think that's me. They thought that was me. And there's a ton of others, like they think we don't have empathy. They think we don't have the same feelings. They think we should be controlled more. They think we have outbursts all the time at random. Like, it's really insane, the things that have come up from all these misconceptions. Like, and the treatment you're talking about is experimental. Like, we don't know the effects of all this, and I'm trying to share it with you right now. And like, even to this day, I'm still struggling socially. Like, I'd say I'm socially years behind because of what I was put through. So it was all because of the lies that I just mentioned. And there's a whole lot more that, check me out on my YouTube page if you want to see all of that. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
What's your YouTube channel called?
It's just Sven Sharpen.
Okay, great. Well, we got to take another break. When we come back, I want to dive into this trans issue, because Sven told me that the autistic kids are many, many times more susceptible to falling for the trans hoax than any other group. So I want to get a good understanding of what that means from his perspective. We'll be right back with the founder of Autistic Freedom Network, Sven Sharpen.
What's going on today? Why are we here?
Well, we're here to testify against HB 251312, easily the worst bill that any state has ever proposed in the history of our country. And what it does is it basically defines, what is it called, misgendering and dead naming as a form of coercive control, and will steal your child if you refuse to allow them to trans. And it also has a clause in it that says if you don't affirm somebody's delusion, then the state comes after you. So, and as an autistic person who is well aware that this transgender ideology is going after my people is just heartbreaking and crushing. In fact, just last night, I saw a post of a woman whose breast had been cut off who was autistic, and it filled me with sadness and rage. And now they're trying to pass a bill that will steal autistic children. I'd say half the victims are autistic, and it will steal autistic children and castrate and mutilate them without loving families. So it basically takes away what little we have left. All we have left is our bodies and our families, and they're destroying that. So that's why I'm here, and I think autistic people need a voice. And when it comes to gender ideology, they target us because they know we're vulnerable, they know we struggle, they know that they can easily exploit us for money and votes, so that we can be dependent on big pharma for life, and that we could continue to vote for politicians that would pass legislation like this. So this is the issue, and part of the problem is we don't have a voice of our own. There's no community, and I know exactly why autistic people struggle. I've learned, and people don't know the reasons. They'll throw in like, yeah, it's hard for us to fit in because we're a little different, or maybe we have a rigid thinking system, or we're focused on inanimate objects, or our interests and stuff like that. But I know the real reason, and it boils down to authoritarian government repressing us in the schools. And then the trans come in and tell us that we struggle because we're trans.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you very much.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. We're live on Worldview Tube and our X Spaces simulcast with that man right there, the founder of the Autistic Freedom Network, Sven Sharpen, who's a young man that has taken it into his heart, and like every other American has in their basic nature, and has answered the question, well, what can I do about it when we're talking about policy that affects autistic kids and parents? And Sven, this trans ideology thing is something that I learned from you when I met you. I wasn't aware of the significance of the numbers that the autistic kids are overwhelmingly able to be turned trans when they're faced with this ideology and they don't have the proper support. Why is that? Do you know yet why that is?
Well, it's for like a whole load of reasons, and some of which we're figuring out now, and others that have been known for quite a while. Like, obviously, because of what we've been put through, it makes us much more vulnerable. Like, if you take away the meaning in someone's life and tell them they're worthless, and then you take away their socialization and their freedom, like, of course they're going to struggle. Like, what do you think's going to happen? And then, the trans cult obviously saw this, and we're like, you know what? We've got a ton of people we can indoctrinate with our ideology. And so they've deliberately made it more appealing to us. I'd say it's deliberate. And they make transness, as they call it, they define it in a way that sounds almost exactly like what it's like to grow up autistic. So, of course, they're making this attractive to us. And they're also coming into our communities and saying, oh, you're all struggling because you're trans, and autistic people are more likely to be trans. And they've invented an entire new lie that I think will make the others look like compliments by comparison. And it's like the worst thing they're going to do is say that all autistic people are trans and then get a government to mandate that we are all trans. So if you're diagnosed with autism, you wouldn't even have an option. You'd be forced to go through the process whether you want to or not. And, honest to God, I hope that doesn't happen. And since we got Trump back last year, it shouldn't happen. But I'm still going to keep an eye on those politicians in Denver that legislated that horrible bill that I described back in the end of April when they were about to pass it. So it's the worst bill ever. And Gavin Newsom, the guy in California, he vetoed the California equivalent bill, and yet Polis here signed it. So it's become worse than California, and it's even worse than Canada. The event that I was at, Billboard Chris was there, and he says it's even worse than Canada. So it's really bad. And if you're autistic, I mean, this is coming for you. And they're trying to drive a wedge between families and kids. Like, of course, that's their goal. And they certainly do it with the special education stuff. And online, oh boy, if you're cut off from socialization, you're going to be online a lot. Yeah. So, of course, there's a lot of influencers who are trans who made transness seem appealing to people on the spectrum and shared their stories of, oh my gosh, I'm the happiest person ever now that I've gone through the process. And instead, you end up worse off than you were before. And now I'm seeing that a lot of detransitioners are on the spectrum, and including the prominent ones that you've probably seen across all these platforms that we're on. And I've grown to know them pretty well. In fact, I just talked with one of them last week, and it's a whole load of stories. And it's like, these stories aren't even all that different from mine. I mean, for the detrans women, it's the undiagnosed perspective, which we are hearing a lot of, but the diagnosed perspective is still something that needs to be talked about, especially considering Big Pharma cares more about money and power rather than the well-being of kids. So half of these detransitioners, like with parts of their bodies missing and their frames deformed and their endocrine systems damaged, like a lot of them will go on to not have children or you have any normal relationship life anymore. Like, it's bad enough before, but it's even worse after because your body doesn't work properly anymore because you were led to believe a lie.
Yeah, I think that's why the suicide rates for post-surgery and post, chemical castration, those kind of activities is so high. I mean, it's higher than even veterans' suicide rates, which is the highest that in society until this trans issue exploded several years ago. You mentioned in the last segment that you were able to defeat that attempt to get you to do that. What's your secret? How did you successfully do that?
Well, that was purely the grace of God. There's no other way to explain it. Like, I held on to faith, and I knew deep down that stuff didn't work. I was raised Christian, and I knew I wasn't fully alone. I knew Jesus was there for me. So that's what prevented me from going trans, is just the fact that I knew that stuff didn't work. And really, it's the grace of God. I mean, there's no way that without God, I would be a detransitioner right now, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, they're using an indoctrination method and a tactic from a concept out of critical theory, which comes out of the school of Marxism, or the Frankfurt School is its modern name, that came into Columbia University when they escaped from Germany in the 1930s. That critical theory approach is to convince you that you're oppressed, and there's an oppressor out there. And I think your description of the school system before they get to the autistic kids with the trans thing, they are oppressing them the way I saw it, and from what you're talking about, right? So you really are feeling like you're the oppressed, and that the oppressors can be stopped. And so once they get to you and start preaching the trans ideology and transition at you, I could see where people would fall for that.
Yeah, it could be all by design for all I know, but yeah, if they don't have an oppression story of the past to bring up, they'll just create one so that they can make kids feel oppressed. And even though a lot of groups who feel like they're oppressed, I mean, the real oppressor is the radical left, globalists, Marxists in the system. But I mean, for the autistic spectrum in particular, it's like, it's easily the worst for us. Like you mentioned, like the suicide rate of detransitioners after they go through the process is 19 times higher than for those before. But, the autistic suicide rate, I imagine, is pretty high too. I haven't been able to find anything that says any exact numbers, but I'd say that's the highest in the world. That doesn't include detransitioners. So it's pretty bad. And like, I don't even know what else to say at this point other than it's just pure evil. We gotta go after them, and that's who I'm fighting against. We're fighting against the radical schools that are doing this to us, and of course the trans cult that did this to us, and all the way up to the top. I mean, that's where we're gonna have to go. But it starts with bringing people on the spectrum together through the Autistic Freedom Network that I created, and I'm trying to get the word out about all of this stuff that's happening. So this whole like Marxist ideology of oppressor versus oppressed is just creating oppression, and we got to do something about it. And being on the spectrum, like, you've been caught up into this. We didn't choose to be caught up into this. So it's time to have a more logical, actually patriotic, God, family, country approach to all of this. So we need to fight it off like actual Americans, not a bunch of cowards. So
yeah,
that's
I
what
found that. I'm glad you said that about your faith and your Christianity, because I found that when people actually study the Bible and see how the reality is that God created men and women, and that he had a design for that and a design for the family, and those kind of things, it helps folks that are faced with this indoctrination to understand the difference between the real science and the Genesis, so to speak, in the book of Genesis of God's work, versus this fake stuff that they're being presented with, that that a man can actually become a woman and have children and those kind of things like a real woman, which is never going to be possible in any sense of the word, based on the biblical construction of men and women and marriage and the family and children, those kind of things. Before we get to this last break, when you're talking to other autistic folks of your age, how do you help counsel them to be wary of this issue?
Well, I mean, I haven't found a whole lot just yet. I'm only in the first year, but I have found a couple, and I mean, they've already kind of gone through a lot of the stuff that I've been through, but for future generations of autistic kids, like, well, just trust your parents more than your doctors. The doctors will frame themselves as the expert and frame the parents as being inexperienced when that's just not true. My parents knew what they were doing, and the doctors and teachers just didn't. So to future generations of autistic kids, just don't trust anyone other than your parents. Your parents know you the best, and you deserve to have a perfect, loving relationship with them. And of course, a relationship with Christ that'll guide you through this mess that the world has created. So that's my advice.
Well, we got to take our last break. When we come back, I want to talk about your activism and encouraging people to vote. And is the network planning on creating an activist network of autistic citizens to help fight this stuff? We'll be right back with the founder of the Autistic Freedom Network, Sven Sharpen.
News is moving faster than ever, and so are we. Worldview Tube brings you 24/7 live stream coverage and now real-time alerts when it matters most. Once you have the Worldview Tube app installed, exit the app and navigate your way to Settings. In Settings, locate the tab labeled Notifications. Select the Notifications tab. Scroll down until you locate the Worldview Tube app icon. Select the tab, and here you can turn on and customize your notification experience for the Worldview Tube app. News doesn't wait, and neither should you. Turn on push notifications to stay informed. Every headline as it happens.
Hey everybody, it's me, Sven here, and I'm voting in my local school board elections, and these are arguably more important than the presidential elections we had. So this is my vote. I'm about to cast it. Yeah, so these elections are more important than presidential elections. Want to know why? Because these are the people taking care of your kids in school. And if you don't have school choice like I didn't, then you're going to have a lot of problems. And the bad school board members are they're gonna indoctrinate your kids. Like, this is a serious issue that we need to talk about. These are more important than presidential elections. You get out and vote in these elections, because if we let the wrong people get in, they're gonna hate America, they're gonna indoctrinate your kids to hate America, and the kids on the spectrum are gonna get the worst end of it. And we cannot allow this to continue. We wanna have school board members that will protect children, one of which that I just voted for has a kid on the spectrum. So that's great. We gotta get the right people into our school boards so that children are never harmed again. They can't vote. It's up to us adults to protect them. So we have to vote for them. They're on the ballot. Go vote in your school board elections. And before I end this, I'm gonna tell you something. You cannot say an election was rigged if you did not vote in it. The reason your side didn't win is because you didn't vote. You cannot say an election was rigged if you didn't vote in it. So just get out and vote. Election day tomorrow. Let's go and take our country back. God bless you and God bless America.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show here on the Worldview Tube network. And Worldview Tube, folks, is a Christian worldview. That's what this network is all about, and why I was excited to have my show on this network when the founder and CEO of the network, Brandon House, gave us the opportunity, because it's a network that provides the Christian worldview at Worldview Tube. So check them out at Rumble. Sign up, subscribe to there. You can subscribe to the Rob Maness Show on Rumble too, or anywhere else where you find social media, like on X, where we do our X simulcast for our space and take questions from our audience. And we love having you there. And my guest today is that man right there, Sven Sharpen, the founder of the Autistic Freedom Network. And Sven, as part of your plans for the organization, are you going to do something like follow the model of Scott Pressler at Early Vote Action and build a base of advocates and citizen action folks, especially from the autistic community?
Well, I know I look kind of like Scott Pressler, but I'm going to take more of a Charlie Kirk approach. In fact, one of the clips you showed was posted on September 9th, the day before the tragedy of the year. And so before, I was just going to sort of follow his lead and create an organization similar to his, Turning Point USA, and follow leads of other good detransitioners like Chloe Cole and Laura Becker, who I've talked to both of them. They're both amazing people, and you know, God bless them. But after what happened, my mission has taken a completely new meaning, and it's like I'm going to follow the footsteps of Charlie Kirk and do for the autistic spectrum what he did for the rest of the young generations, which means not only creating a voting network, but also going to places across the country and having rallies of people on the spectrum and telling them they're worth fighting for. And, we're also going to focus on self-improvement and self-control, as opposed to basically the opposite of what the special education people do. So instead of saying, oh, the world's better because you're in it, it's more like, is the world better because you're in it? And that's a Charlie Kirk line right there. So we're going to focus certainly on self-improvement, as well as just getting people on the spectrum to understand why they're in the situation they're in. And the first thing I'm going to do is just organize those that haven't yet been captured by this radical left ideology. And then from there, we can start going across the country, hopefully to university campuses, like create chapters, or at least partner up with Turning Point. If they're watching this, that's great. But partner up with Turning Point and YAF and others to let them know what's been happening and how we can fix it. Like my mission page on my website has 20 goals on what we should do. And the first one is just to create this sort of movement. Like detransitioners, a lot of them are on the spectrum, especially the leaders, like the top ones, in prominence, they really lead the movement. And if they can create a movement, like so can the rest of the people on the spectrum. I mean, a lot are detransitioners themselves, and even for those of us that aren't detransitioners, we've still been subject to a harmful medical and educational practice. Even though our bodies aren't damaged, our lives and our minds are still feeling the effects of all of this. Like it's mental mutilation in a way. Like your body might be intact, but your mind has been dealing with quite a lot of stuff, both chemically and just psychologically. It's insane what's been happening to us. So it's time for the people of the spectrum to have their own version of Turning Point USA. And unlike all the other organizations that we've seen, they're all woke. I haven't found one conservative one. And that's ended now that I've created the first ever America-centric, God-centric organization for people on the spectrum. And it just goes for everyone on the spectrum. You don't absolutely have to follow my worldview to be a part of my network, but you have to understand, we're doing this for a reason, and we are a conservative organization. So we want to help autistic people live the lives that our Lord created us to live, which is, to be raised naturally, to get have a career in something you're good at. God calls you in your earthly life to get married, to have lots of adorable babies, and just repeat the process over and over again. Like a diagnosis of autism shouldn't ever stop you from doing that stuff. And quite frankly, it shouldn't define who we are. So that's what I'm trying to do. And I want to be the sort of leader that for the spectrum that Charlie Kirk was for the young generation. So I'm following more of the Charlie Kirk playbook rather than Scott Pressler.
Well, that's fantastic. In just a few hours, I'm going to be speaking to the new TPUSA chapter at the Southeastern Louisiana University a couple hours from here where I'm at. And I will mention the Autistic Freedom Network in my talk there, and I'll incorporate that in my talk and connect people that want to connect with you about that, because I think that's very important. I like that approach. And you sound like Charlie. He said many times, fall in love, go have babies, and live a life of faith and help others. Over and over, he would say that. As a matter of fact, in one of his last interviews, he was asked, "What do you want to be remembered for?" And that he said, "For my faith," and that I wasn't afraid to tell the truth. Those are the things that I value by knowing him early on in our political careers, and then following and supporting his organization as he supported mine. You mentioned the goals page on your website. That's a pretty long list. Are there any others you want to highlight before we get to the end of the show about your objectives for the organization? And of course, we want you to tell people how to sign up to the organization and support it too.
Yeah. Well, some of the other goals I mentioned are to go after the radical trans ideology and the radical trans Marxist extremists inside of autistic communities, to cleanse them all out. We got to get them out so that people on the spectrum can have more freedom to not only decide who they are, but to actually have a good path forward. And I know deep down that everyone, like a lot of people on the spectrum that I've seen both online and in person and in shows, they all want to have their own families. They want to have their own lives and their own way of participating in society. And we all deserve our own part in the world. So, I mean, as a Christian, I believe I'm not of this world, but we got to improve it and make it better for future generations of young people. So I know deep down that a lot of autistic people want to have families and careers and things they're good at, and that's what I'm certainly going to support. And we're also going to certainly go after this radical special needs cartel. Like, it's practically a term meaning undesirable. It's a cover-up term in my mind. And so we got to go after them. We got to go after the politicians and the radical NGOs paying for it all, like Autism Speaks, and other organizations that promote that alongside trans ideology, and go after all the misconceptions, debunk them, get rid of the whole, autistic people are gross, so that we can go from being the last people that someone would want to date to being one of the first. And unlike every other organization for folks on the spectrum that I've seen, we're actually going to be autistic people first, and our needs will be covered first and foremost. And let's be honest, I mean, Charlie Keeble, another guy on the spectrum, he's from the UK. He talked about that we should be proud to be in the country we live in and to be a part of, America, or I guess Britain, as he's from. But we deserve to be American patriots. We deserve to love Jesus. We deserve to have the life that God created us to live. We deserve to live the American dream. And that's what we're here to fight for. And that's what I'm going to fight for. So, and it starts here and now. And that's what I'm going to do.
Do you think that's, again, I couldn't say it any better. I didn't realize until I started talking with you, Sven, that the unemployment rate for autistic men and women is extremely high. It's very difficult for them to get employment opportunities, and they have trouble in the dating each other. So the challenge is much greater to do the things that Charlie said we should all be doing, which is fall in love, have babies, go, work in a field that we want to work in, and be successful, and take care of others through our faith. Are there any programs out there existing now to help autistic people get gainful employment?
I mean, there are some, but as I've mentioned earlier, they're all really woke, and others just, we haven't seen any improvement in the quality of life. Like, there's barely been any change in this massive unemployment rate, and a college degree doesn't even make a difference. It's still the same, which just proves that college is in fact a scam. I've known this since I was like 15 years old. And, obviously we're going to fix this. And of course, focusing on self-improvement is going to help a lot, but also just, again, debunking all the lies, saying there's other lies out there that say we're lazy and disgusting and undesirable. Like, it makes people not want to go out with us. It makes people not want to hire us. I mean, you can not put autism in your resume. I didn't do that, but there's still a lot of other issues because of your past and the problems with the special education. Like, you didn't get a proper education, and you didn't really have much in the way of experience. And it's just the whole way it is now. Like, it's really hard to get a job, just no matter who you are these days. But we deserve to be able to prove skill. Like, it's all based on rigged credentials and hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. I mean, that's just not worth it. There's a huge shortage in trades, and there's a lot of autistic people that'd be really good at trades. So, and you could make decent money from that. So we deserve to have careers in what we're good at, and we're always good at something. You are never good at nothing. You are always good at something.
Yeah.
So
if you want to be in the trades, learn to weld and come to South Mississippi. We have shipbuilding operations here. They're down thousands of welders all the time. So if people want to be in the trades, come to South Mississippi and learn to weld. There's a free program at the local community college, the Mississippi Gulf Coast Community College, that teaches welding. Tell folks to come on down here if they can get here. And if they are here, they should be taking advantage of those kind of things. Well, tell people where they can go to find you at your website, what your website is, and how they can help by donations or whatever else.
Yeah, so I'm on X, Instagram, and YouTube. I guess Facebook too, but I don't really use that. So I'm on those first three. And it's at Sven_Sharpen. And make sure you spell it correctly, as it is on screen right here, SCHARPEN. Everyone gets it wrong when they don't see it spelled out. So make sure you spell that right, at Sven_Sharpen. But you could probably just look up Sven Sharpen and you'll find me. So, but do make sure you spell it right, because, I'm right here for you. If you have someone on the spectrum or are on the spectrum yourself, tell them about me. It's just, I'm here for them, and I want to give them the American way of life, and more importantly, the Christian way of life. That's a good path forward.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, sir. Appreciate all your time and the work you are doing. We fully support you. Look forward to having a great relationship as we move into the future.
Yeah. Thank you, Rob.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you. Tomorrow is Truth Thursday. Ken Good talking about, we're going to be talking about how the effort to do away with this no cash bail craziness that the lefties have been putting in their cities. Ken's an expert on that, and I look forward to talking with him. I'll see you then.